예, 안녕하십니까. 홍기빈클럽입니다. 예, 오늘은 풍광이 바뀌었죠. 이곳은 태국의 치앙마이입니다. 뒤에 한번 보시죠. 참 이게 넓은 평원이죠. 그리고 도시가 이렇게 숲속에 푹 파묻혀 있어요. 그래서 녹지하고 도시가 잘 구별이 안 될 정도로 녹지가 많아요. 햇빛이 너무 세가지고 얼굴이 다 타서 제 그 백옥 같던 피부가 지금은 시커멓게 돼가지고 좀 그렇습니다. 제가 근데 피부를 태우러 온 건 아니고요. 이곳에서 제 친구인 미셸 바우엔스라는 사람하고 간단한 그 발표를 하고 둘이 같이 발표를 하고 워크숍을 갖기로 해서 이곳에 왔어요. 친구 미셸 바우엔스라고 하는 사람에 대해서 좀 소개를 시켜드릴게요. 이분은 벨기에에 있는 P2P 파운데이션이라고 하는 건 창립자인데요. 지난 20년 동안 이 디지털 노마드들을 중심으로 해가지고서 P2P 커먼스 운동이라는 게 있었어요. P2P라고 하는 거는 동료 생산이죠. 피어들끼리 중앙의 명령을 받지 않고 같이 협력해서 뭔가를 생산하는, 그러니까 위키피디아도 P2P 방식이죠. 그 다음에 커먼스라고 하는 거는 그렇게 해서 동료들이 함께 만들어 놓은 재산을 뭐 구글이니 아마존 같은 데서 가져가가지고 자기들 재산으로 만드는 게 아니라 공동재산, 커먼스를 만들어 가지고 생태적으로나 사회적으로나 좀 더 큰 기여를 할 수 있는 생산 조직으로 만들자, 이거 두 개를 결합시키는 운동이 P2P 커먼스 운동이에요. P2P 파운데이션은 이 비트코인을 하고 관계해 가지고 아주 유명해진 곳입니다. 이 P2P 커먼스를 할 적에 중요하게 쓰였던 기술 중에 하나가 블록체인이 있는데요. 블록체인을 활용했던 비트코인, 그걸 처음에 발표했었던 그 논문이 처음 웹에 게재됐던 곳이 이 P2P 파운데이션의 그 게시판이었습니다. 그걸로 아주 유명해졌는데요. 이분이 치앙마이에서 오래 사셨어요. 한 20년 동안 쭉 살았는데, 이분하고 제가 지난 1년 동안 일주일에 한 번씩 스카이프로 대화를 하면서 이 코비드 상황과 인플레이션과 이런 상황에서 P2P 커먼스는 어디로 나가는지에 대해서 쭉 이렇게 얘기를 했었어요. 그걸 요번에 같이 한번 결산을 하고 발표를 하려고 왔습니다. 지금처럼 ESG다, 사회적 가치다 이런 얘기 많이 할 적에 공동장부란 거를 한번 만들어 보자, 이런 아이디어가 하나 있고요. 그 다음에 지금처럼 인플레이션과 지구화의 불안으로 세계 무역이 힘들어지고 여러 어려움을 겪을 적에 코스멀 로컬리즘이라고 한 걸 사용해 보자, 이렇게 두 가지 아이디어를 아마 그분이 이번 영상에서 좀 더 풍부하게 설명을 해 주실 거라고 봅니다. 이곳 치앙마이에 또 재밌는 게 하나 있어요. 여기가 이른바 디지털 노마드들이 제일 좋아하는 곳으로 알려져 있습니다. 그러니까 디지털 노마드라는 분들이 있죠. 그러니까는 이 디지털 쪽 일하는 사람들은 어디 장소에 구애받지 않으니까 어떤 새로운 기술이라든가 새로운 사회적 혁신이라든가 이런 걸 고민하면서 돌아다니는 사람들이 많이 있는데, 이 치앙마이가 물가도 싸고 풍광도 좋고 그래서 디지털 노마드들 모이는 집결지 넘버1이에요. 그 워크숍에 모였던 분들도 이렇게 여기 태국 현지인들은 거의 없고 세계 곳곳에서 모인 사람들이었는데, 오늘 미셸이 이번 영상에서요, 이 치앙마이의 그 창조적 경제라고 그럴까? 이것에 대해서도 조금 이야기를 할 것 같습니다. 자, 그러면은 재밌게 한번 영상 봐주시면 좋겠습니다. Alright, then are you ready for going for this interview?
Yeah, I'm good.
Right.
I'm good.
Oh, 1, 2. So the first question is, this is for the Korean audience. So I hope that you introduce yourself shortly to Korean audience and what you have been doing in Chiang Mai for the 20 years and what was the nature of your work as the originator of the P2P Foundation and the P2P Commons work internationally.
Yeah, thanks for this conversation. So my name is Michel Baouwens. I'm originally from Belgium. I'm 63. I live in Chiang Mai. And I'm the founder of the Peer-to-Peer Foundation. So after a career in diplomacy and in business, I decided that our civilizations were in danger, let's put it that way. And I decided to create an organization that would look at the seed forms of the new. So we know a number of things are not functioning properly. And we know that a lot of people are trying to create different ways of organizing economics and politics, and around two kind of key themes, which is peer-to-peer, so the ability that people now have to connect digitally and create non-territorial communities. So they're still embedded in their geography and their place, but at the same time, their mind can be connected to people all over the world, and they can learn from each other. So communicating, self-organizing, creating new value streams that mix geography and the digital, that's interesting for me. The second point is the commons, which is that people can create joint projects together. So the commons is anything that is a shared resource that is constructed or managed by a community or a group of stakeholders and uses its own forms of governance. So it's not private and it's not state. And so the Peer-to-Peer Foundation is a network of researchers and activists around the world who collaborate in creating a knowledge base around these peer-to-peer and commons-based alternatives in food, in transport, in energy. So for example, in energy you have centralized energy, but you also have distributed energy. In housing you have public housing, you have private housing, but you also can have co-housing and cooperative housing. There's a way to reorganize transport around shared mobility, etc., etc. So that's basically what I've been doing for 20 years, and then starting, trying to theorize a transition from one form of civilization, which we believe is in trouble, to a new type of civilization that we call cosmolocal civilization, which is basically returning to some form of a relocalization of production, because we spend 3 times as much on transporting things and on making things, so it's very heavy on the environment and on resources. We absolutely need to diminish our resource use. So the basic idea is everything that's heavy is local, and everything that's light is global and shared. So we want to create global open design communities that are already being created in free software, open designs, distributed manufacturing. So the combination of local physical production with global cooperation. That's basically what we're about.
Okay. So we just talked about the idea of public ledger. I think you just explained the idea of cosmolocalism. So
Yeah.
could you tell us more about the idea of public ledger?
Right. So just to give you a bit of context, I think we are moving from a commodity-based economy based on scarcity of labor and resources to a contributory economy. So the problem today is that we believe that we first have to extract value from scarce resources, and then the state will tax and redistribute. So it's a kind of an indirect funding of positive, civic engagement. And with public ledgers, what we try to envisage is the idea that if a citizen contributes something positive to his community, to the ecology, to the environment, decarbonization, etc., then he can lodge his contribution on a public ledger, so a publicly visible ledger. And there's some funding mechanism directly attached to his contribution. So your contribution is verified, you recognize as a society, recognize the value being created, and then there's some kind of reward system. And that reward system can be because it's a public priority. So the regional government or the state decides that we need to decarbonize, so we're going to fund the people who will do the best in decarbonization. But it can also be big corporations, big institutions which are profiting from these contributions. I'll give you an example just to make it realistic. So in France there is a big community land trust. So these are people who are buying over land and then putting in it a trust. And then they create contracts with biological organic farmers. Now these people have calculated that they save the French state 350 million euro per year, because they don't use pesticides and fertilizers, etc., so they don't pollute the water. So the government doesn't have to fund depollution anymore. So why not say, okay, all the institutions, like in this case the state and the depollution agencies, that save money because of the contributions of these farmers, why not say, well, 1/3 or 1/2 of what we are saving thanks to you we're putting in this fund. And so you lodge your decarbonation and depollution efforts, they're verified, they're tokenized, so we recognize the value, and then this money will serve to directly fund these contributions. So this is basically the basic idea behind public ledgers, and we believe it's one of the institutions of the commons. So today we have transnational institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, that are run by states. And then we have transnational finance, big corporations, big banks, flows of finance that are no longer under control of the national state. And we believe that we should create a counterforce, which would be transnational, translocal, civic, commons-oriented institutions. Because the problem is, the strategic problem today is that the state itself, the nation state, can no longer offer any efficient opposition to problems that are created by local finance. So we need to create a counterforce which is at the same level as the danger. So that's what we call public ledgers. We call them institutions of the commons, magisteria of the commons. So what you have to imagine is like big domain-specific institutions. So for example, there's so much copper in the world, so we have to make sure that we don't go over certain negative pivots, like overuse copper. So we have a global institutions that measures these materials, identifies what are the negative pivots, and can say to the people, okay, we can get over that negative pivot. So let's make sure that we don't go over it, so that the copper remains available for the next 7 generations, right? So that would be a magisterium of the commons, a specific institution that protects common resources, so that the whole humanity and the web of life can keep using them to survive in the next generations, not just now.
But it sounds like that even the provincial government, so no matter what is the level or the size of the government, the public ledger could be practiced in many different
Yeah,
sizes.
it can be, if at a level of a village, it doesn't matter. It's, the digital can be used at scale, and you can choose the scale in which you apply them. So, it's not necessarily a nation state. For example, there's a project that is called Factor 20 reduction. So, for example, if you reorganize commercial transport in a city based on cargo bikes and electric vans, this has been done, and we can show that you can save 95% of energy usage in that city while keeping the same level of commercial transport. Right? This would be extraordinary advance. This can be done at any level, right? You can do that at the city level, and then what you could do is you could have leagues of cities, right?
Leagues of cities.
Yeah. So within the city, you have a coalition of the city, the commercial sector, the non-profit sector, and the research sector, like the universities. Those 4 coalesce to help citizens do the ecological transition. So people can propose projects that are going in that direction. So there's a city lab where you make an agreement called the Commons Accord. And the city directs the assistance that will be given to these projects. Not necessarily commercial, it could be, like giving a place or changing the regulations, right? So this is at the local level. And then fractally, so that the same structure would then apply with all these cities that are doing the same thing, could create at a global level a coalition of support for the global open design community that does the same thing everywhere, right? So you have, for example, Airbnb. Airbnb has many negative effects, like gentrification. Uber has also many negative effects, because it forces the drivers to compete for business, and so they drive even more than before. But we could create Fairbnb and a driver co-op, right? And so every provisioning system can be changed in that way through mutualization and bring down the level of usage of matter and energy. But we need structures for that. We need to do this in an organized way, and so I believe in this model, which was pioneered by Bologna, which is now being used by 250 Italian cities and has mobilized 1 million Italian citizens to do regenerative work in Italian cities, right? But imagine that we can scale this by creating city leagues. But you know, it could be regions that combine together, like the Basque country and the Catalan country and the Flemish country, right? So it's a very flexible system that can be applied at different scales.
I mean, so some kind of a comprehensive planning or designing for this kind of P2P and commons type of work to be working in a certain.
So personally, I believe that it can start at the grassroots and show that it works. But to really scale, I do think there's a need for public policy. So I would frame it as a reindustrialization and relocalization policy. We all know that the global order is disintegrating, and at least two groups now with the Ukrainian war.
Yeah.
So I think it makes a lot of sense to secure supply chains and to make sure that a lot of things are produced locally again. It's not like 100% from 100%. It's more like smart localization, right? It's like changing the default. Today we get everything through markets and trade from abroad, and whatever can survive is done locally. What I'm suggesting is the opposite, is we produce locally, and what we can't make locally we get from somewhere else. There's no need to be completely local. But I think the locus needs to change, and that's what cosmo-localization is about.
I just want you to emphasize just one more thing that we just talked about as a one possibly the desirable outcome of this public ledger, this pro-distribution instead of redistribution.
Yeah, pre-distribution instead of redistribution. So,
Right.
so now we have a system. So you need to extract value from scarce commodities, including labor and nature. That creates profit for companies, and then the state taxes and eventually redistributes. And pre-distribution is recognizing every contribution immediately and making sure there is a reward system for these contributions. So you don't wait to first extract. You immediately find a system to contribute, to reward contributions. So farmers who contribute to the depollution of their land and the healing of their land shouldn't wait for money from the state that is actually dependent on some extraction of mining somewhere else. So it's really a shift, like a total shift of philosophy from a commodity-based capitalist economy to a contribution-based, impact-aware, post-capitalist. And it doesn't mean abolishing the market nor the state. It just means that the state and the market should be re-embedded in social and ecological priorities.
I think what we talked about as the example of the Dutch farmers demonstration nowadays, it could be a very good point, the persuading the Korean audience to acknowledge the merit of this public ledger thing.
Absolutely, because what's happening now is that we have very repressive and punitive ecological measures.
Right.
For example, in the Netherlands, the idea was that within in 2030, 1/3 of the production has to go down, and that those farmers who don't succeed in doing this will be expropriated by the government, right? And so this created enormous fear in the farming population who want to keep their jobs and their economy. So if instead you can say that you're a stakeholder in this, like we will reward you for all the good you do in transitioning to more organic, less polluting farming, and we provide funding for that, right? Then suddenly everybody has a stake in doing it. Because the big danger now, if you think politically, is that ecological transition will be seen as an elite imposition, and will create a reactionary wave of popular movements, which then also puts in danger the ecological transition. So we need to merge the social and the ecological. And in the end, that means actually making sure that people can make a living by doing the good things. And I just want to say that Chiang Mai is a good example of a city that has adapted to challenges, and this is, before COVID, was the global capital of digital nomads, with 25,000 people working here for remote clients, with a vibrant cultural life, and it had a crypto economy, and of course all of that has kind of gone down with COVID, but now it's taking up again. But I would say Chiang Mai is full of maker spaces, co-working spaces. There's even a passport for digital nomads. So it's probably worth for you to visit this place and see a good example of adaptation to the creative economy. For a long time it was actually number one. But of course now with COVID it's changed. And one of the things that happened is that a lot of people are going to the islands now. So Koh Phangan, for example, is one of the prime destinations of digital nomad workers. But you have to know there's a whole circuit. So they go from here, Khao San Road in Bangkok, Pai in northern Thailand, then they go Ubud in Bali. They also go to 3 different places in the Canary Islands. Portugal is extremely popular with digital nomads. Medellin in Colombia. And one of the means of creating a dynamic economy is actually to open up to these people, because they're very bright and capable people, the best programmers and developers and designers, and so it's a good thing for Chiang Mai that it succeeded in doing that. Yeah. I'm not aware of that there are too many Koreans in this digital nomad world, but I just want to mention very briefly that my children went to a bilingual school here in Chiang Mai, and half of the kids are Korean. So the mixed foreign Thai system is an interesting adaptation of education that has a lot more warmer aspects than I think some of these hyper-competitive Korean education systems. So it's plenty of Korean people out here.
I hope someday some Korean cities might make some kind of alliance with Chiang Mai, and we'll see more communications of people and ideas between those 2 countries.
That would be great.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Mr. Baouens. Thanks for the interview.